Some said he cut out a man's heart on Custer Hill. Others called him the most ruthless survivor the U.S. Army ever faced. Rain in the Face, Lakota War Chief Victor at Little Bighorn, became a living legend in the aftermath of America's worst battlefield defeat, where 268 cavalrymen died and 5 companies vanished in under an hour. But the official records don't match the rumors, and even Rain in the Face himself would spend decades denying those gruesome claims. Why did one man's alleged brutality become central to the story a wounded nation told itself? And what really happened in the chaos when myth and massacre collided? The answers lie buried where legend and evidence no longer agree. Rain in the Face's name traveled faster than any official report. Before the smoke had cleared at Little Bighorn, a rumor was already circling. One of Custer's officers hadn't just been killed. His heart had been cut out and taken as a trophy. The accusation landed on Rain in the Face, the Hunkpapa Lakota warrior who'd survived the slaughter on Custer Hill. No one could say, with certainty, who started the story. Some blamed vengeful warriors. Others whispered that it was payback for a past humiliation at Fort Abraham Lincoln. The tale changed with every retelling, growing darker each time. In some versions, Rain in the Face himself boasted of the deed. In others, he spat a piece of the heart back onto the corpse. But whenever the story reached the press or the army camps, the details blurred. No eyewitness ever stepped forward. No burial record confirmed the mutilation. Yet the legend stuck, fueled by fear and defeat. Rain in the Face became the embodiment of every American nightmare about the battle. A survivor not just of the fighting, but of the stories that grew in its shadow. He would spend the rest of his life answering to a crime that no one could prove, and that he would later deny. The question of what really happened on Custer Hill refused to die, haunting both the man and the nation that needed someone to blame. 5 companies of the 7th Cavalry vanished in less than an hour. The bodies of 210 men lay scattered across the ridgelines and coulees north of the river. By the time the shooting stopped, the U.S. Army had lost 268 men, over half of Custer's entire regiment. The scale of the disaster was unprecedented. No other American force in the Indian Wars had faced such annihilation in a single day. Across the river, the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho encampment stretched for nearly 3 miles. The village held as many as 8,000 people. Of those, an estimated 1,500 to 1,800 were warriors able to fight. Even the lowest estimates put the native force at triple the number of soldiers under Custer's direct command. The defenders were not a ragged band, but a massed, coordinated force, men who had spent years on horseback, fighting to protect their homes and families. Native losses were far lighter by comparison. Most modern estimates put their dead between 60 and 100, roughly the equivalent of 2 football teams. For the Lakota and Cheyenne, the cost was real, but nothing like the devastation suffered by the 7th Cavalry. The battlefield itself became a study in balance. One side nearly wiped out, the other walking away with the spoils. Rain in the Face was among the Lakota fighters pressing the attack on Custer Hill. His survival was not a matter of luck, but of numbers, tactics, and the sheer force of the village behind him. In the aftermath, the emptiness left by the slaughter demanded an explanation, something beyond the cold arithmetic of defeat. In 1879, a poem by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow appeared in print, carrying the story of Rain in the Face far beyond the plains of Montana. The Revenge of Rain in the Face painted the Lakota warrior as a figure of mythic vengeance, a man who, in the heat of battle, tore out the heart of his enemy to settle an old score. Longfellow's words were picked up by newspapers across the country, their headlines echoing the poem's most lurid detail. Journalists repeated the story without hesitation, often quoting the poem itself as proof. Within months, the lines between fact and fiction began to blur. The poem's circulation was swift and wide. By the end of 1879, editors in New York, Boston, and Chicago had reprinted its verses, sometimes alongside reports from the frontier. The story gained new life in political speeches and on the floors of Congress. where the supposed mutilation was held up as evidence of the savagery that had claimed Custer's men. Calls for more troops and harsher campaigns found justification in the legend. Longfellow had never set foot at Little Bighorn, but his pen shaped public memory more than any official report. The heart-cutting myth became a commercial spectacle, sold in dime novels, recited at veterans' gatherings, and woven into the very language of defeat. For Rain in the Face, the poem was both a sentence and a spotlight, fixing his name to a story that grew with every retelling. In the years after the battle, the legend of Rain in the Face became a traveling act. By 1894, his supposed confession had become headline material, not in a courtroom or on the reservation, but under the electric lights of Coney Island. There, in a sideshow booth, journalist W.K. Thomas staged an interview that would echo across the country. Rain in the Face, presented for a paying crowd, claimed to have killed Tom Custer and cut out his heart, even describing spitting a piece of it back at the corpse. The story was made for spectacle, and the audience got their money's worth. The tale was printed in newspapers, then reprinted in pulp magazines and dime novels, each version more lurid than the last. The economics of entertainment drove the myth further. Traveling Wild West shows cast native warriors as villains, with Rain in the Face billed as the most ruthless survivor of Custer's last stand. Dime novels, sold for a nickel in railway stations and general stores, repeated the heart-cutting story as fact. By the turn of the century, the legend had become a commodity, one that sold tickets, papers, and cheap paperbacks by the thousands. For the American public, the boundary between truth and performance disappeared. The commercial frenzy fed on itself, with each new retelling cementing Rain in the Face's reputation. The line between confession and theater blurred, and the story's grip on the national imagination only tightened. What began as rumor and poetry was now a business, and the man at the center of it all had become a brand. In 1905, Dr. Charles Eastman sat with Rain in the Face at Standing Rock. The old warrior, facing the end of his life, denied the story that had haunted him for decades. He told Eastman he had not killed either Custer brother nor cut out Tom Custer's heart. The chaos of battle, he said, made it impossible to know who struck the final blow. No battlefield eyewitness ever claimed to see the act. Army surgeons left no record of a missing heart. Modern archaeological surveys at Little Bighorn, led by Douglas Scott and Richard Fox, found no evidence of organ removal among the officer remains. The physical proof that could settle the legend simply does not exist. What remains is a void, filled for generations by rumor and poetry, but never by science. The press and the public wanted heroes and villains, and survivor stories became raw material for both. Cheyenne Chief Two Moon, who fought at Little Bighorn, described the chaos, but never singled out Rain in the Face for any act of brutality. His silence left a vacuum others rushed to fill. John Martin, the last messenger from Custer, was cast in some papers as a coward who abandoned his post, in others as a loyal courier who tried to save the regiment. His own interviews changed with the audience. Meanwhile, Curly, the Crow Scout, found himself labeled the sole survivor in headlines, though records show he watched from afar and never saw the final moments. Each tale was shaped to fit what the country needed: a scapegoat, a hero, a witness. The lack of hard evidence only made the legends harder to kill. At Little Bighorn, 268 U.S. soldiers died in a single afternoon, over half the regiment, while native casualties numbered around 60 to 100. Rain in the Face was present on Custer Hill, but no verified document, medical record, or primary account confirms he cut out Tom Custer's heart. The National Park Service notes, Rain in the Face later denied this, and archaeological surveys have found no physical proof. Yet, the legend grew, propelled by an 1879 Longfellow poem and decades of sensational press. Survivor stories like Curly's and Martin's show how myth can outpace fact. What remains unknown is the exact fate of Tom Custer's body and the precise actions of every man on the field. Today, historians and museums separate poetic fantasy from forensic likelihood, reframing Rain in the Face. not as a villain, but as a fighter who survived a pivotal battle. The evidence tells us that legends often reveal more about the fears and needs of a nation than about the people at their center.